So that was an extract from the third and the last movement of Messiaen's Trois petites liturgies. It was a piece that he wrote in 1943, and it was actually the first time that he used the ondes Martenot, which I shall describe to you, in a context with other orchestral instruments. And he experimented in ways which he would later develop in the bigger piece, the Turangalila Symphony. But the instrument that he used for the Trois petites liturgies was really almost identical to the one that I'm using today. The instrument had been invented in the 1920s. Maurice Martenot, who was a cellist, had been a radio operator in the First War, and he'd become fascinated by the very pure sound of a radio wave, a sound which was something like this. What we would nowadays call a sine wave. And when he came back from the war, he developed an instrument which could produce that basic sound over a large range. He later incorporated other sounds, so now my sound palette goes from that sine wave sound through to something more sawtooth-like, and pretty well everything in between. It looks as if the instrument only has 6 octaves, but in fact I have a switch here in the middle which switches everything up by an octave, so effectively I have 7 octaves. And also, what we'll talk about now is that the instrument has 2 entirely different ways of being played. In the extract, you saw that I was playing what Martenot called the ruban, or in English, the ribbon. It's very hard to see, but there's a very fine thread which has a ring attached to it, and this thread is running around a drum inside the instrument. And the movement of the thread, by using this ring, alters the pitch. So effectively, I have a sliding frequency, like this. Now, you would have seen that I was pressing on a strip here in front of the keys. The strip itself doesn't have any sound at all. It's just a guide. I don't know whether you can see, but there are indents where the white notes approximately are, and little studs for the black notes. So I could play in the air, but it's much easier and more comfortable to play resting on this guide strip. And if I want to make vibrato, as I would if I were a string player, I simply move. I mean, again, either it could be done in the air, or it can be played by resting on the strip. But the absolute heart of the instrument is what the left hand is doing, because while the right hand is preparing the pitch, either with these little keys or with the ribbon device, it's the left hand that's actually producing the sound. So in effect, my left hand is like my breath would be if I were playing a wind instrument, or my bowing hand if I were playing a string instrument. And this raised wooden key here, the more I press that, the louder the sound. So the sound can come from really nothing and can become very loud indeed. And all the attacks and all the dynamic and all the things which breath or a bow would do are done with the left hand. Without the left hand, the keyboard doesn't sound at all. So also my left hand is controlling the timbre, the sounds, and also the 3 different speakers that I've got here. There's a principal speaker, which is the sound you've mostly been hearing. There's a little spring resonance, yes, there, which, if I used it alone, will just continue to ring. There, the springs in there, I can lengthen or shorten them so that the ring is longer or shorter. But obviously, once the sound sets up, I can't shut it off as I would do if it was an electronic resonance. And then this rather amazing speaker, which is called the Métallique, is an orchestral gong with there's a pin in the front, and that pin is going through a hole in the gong into a drive mechanism, so that by attaching the gong to the drive mechanism in that way, the gong becomes the speaker diaphragm and makes indeed a sort of metallic sound. I'll show you how it sounds if I just run up and down just using that speaker. And that also has a sort of very pretty, sparkly after sound. It's clearly not a large sound, and I would very rarely use it on its own, although there's one place in the Turangalila Symphony where I do use it completely by itself. But I can use it in conjunction with the others. I have, as well as having the three sort of on-off switches for these three speakers, I also have a dial which gives me control about how much to have one in relation to another. The sounds we've talked about a little bit already. A couple of them are on sliders. The keyboard also has a bit of a lateral movement. The whole thing can be moved a little bit to make a vibrato, which is like this. And let's put some real sound in there too. Which gives a sort of a life to the sound. It can't be dragged very far in either direction, but it does give it a sort of a spirit. And those, I think, those would be the chief things which would give you a sense of what is going on. Each of us players might choose different ways of getting to the sounds that Messiaen asks for. He's pretty specific, and he would always indicate where the player should use the ruban or the keyboard. But again, that would be pretty obvious. If you were to play a fast passage, it's obviously impractical to be moving very fast on this device here. But if you wanted to make any kind of singer-like glissando or portamento, then this is the place to do it, because with the sound being produced with the left hand, the degree of glissando or portamento is entirely down to how much sound I retain. So it can be from something as coarse as to something much more discreet, where I'm really just catching the beginning and the end of the slide. I think that just about covers the sort of basic setup of the instrument. In this piece, I would say that the onde is quite often acting as a support to the choir. In the extract I played at the beginning, the choir have already delivered a version of that long sort of rhapsodic tune, and then the onde comes in with this marvelous counter melody. In the first movement, there's a bird solo played by the first violin, and the onde has a sort of answering, well, actually a sort of duet solo, which is really sort of at the absolute opposite extreme to the passage that I played at the beginning. Let me show you how that sounds. sound and the violin solo are playing through a texture which has a sort of much sweeter choral sound and strings. But I think you can very easily see that the onde is actually an instrument of great contrast. Many people are only really aware of the sliding vocal ability, but also, of course, it has this keyboard ability too. It wasn't designed to replicate any other instrument. It was designed really to take its place as an additional acoustic instrument in the orchestra. And it still, despite the fact that the sound is made electrically, I think that the effect is very acoustic and actually very human. But I would say that that's chiefly because the player has to do absolutely everything in relation to the sound. There's nothing actually produced for it. And I just think there's really nothing quite like it.